Add pin. Woohoo! Thanks for making it.
Yeah, my
Uh,
pleasure.
yes. Well, we'll jump straight in then. I'm just gonna give the intro for everyone. So this is Sergio. He's an amazing soul. We've known each other. I'm so grateful to call him a friend. And he is a prolific artist and art instructor based in LA, known for his unique style that merges organic elements to create innovative works. Over the last 10 years, his art has evolved to celebrate the intricate foundation innovation found in nature and the human body. Recently, Sheen commissioned Sergio and four other artists to paint murals across LA. His mural titled Generations celebrates tradition, family, and the love of music, featuring members of a family of mariachis spanning four generations. So Sergio has been commissioned by lots of big brands doing so much cool work to showcase his art. And why I wanted to put this panel together for creative entrepreneurs is because it's an area that is really forgotten. And a lot of people don't realize that an artist is an entrepreneur. Or when I was a model, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur, but you really are because you're managing your social media, you're your own personal brand, you're keeping up with customer success. And so a lot of artistic fields, they aren't seen as entrepreneurs, except it's still the same thing. You have to evolve it into a business in order to succeed. And I just have a lot of respect for artists and creatives because you usually get a lot more pushback if you want to go in that direction. I know I did. My parents were actually completely against me going into modeling. I think they thought it was if you were an intelligent woman, why would you go into something like that? But I know how hard it is. I know it's hard to go against the grain and go after your dreams for something like that. And so, without further ado, we'll start our panel and just kind of chat. So, maybe I'll start with just asking you, Sergio. Um, was there a specific moment or event that pushed you to embrace your authenticity, to build your business around your passions? And what challenges did you face when starting your business as an artist?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. And yeah, as far as being an artist, one of the things I had been a fine artist initially, showing paintings in galleries and exhibitions and things like that. But then I don't think I had a certain level of seriousness as far as turning it into a business early on in my career as a fine artist. And it wasn't until I think that my dad had passed away, that there was this sort of awakening to do more, be more, and maybe push this whole art thing to a level where I could make enough money that I could step up for the family when they need me, that I could provide something or bring something to the table. So part of it was passion, but also part of it was purpose and sort of elevating what I value myself as far as my art and things like that. And so I had to step into that place. And when I was first getting into it, when it comes to doing murals, at the time that I started, um, let's be honest, a lot of businesses, a lot of scenarios don't really call for a mural in an ordinary situation on a week-to-week basis for any business. So the first thing I had to think was, well, how do I get myself out there? Like if I'm not going to get immediately be drawing clients, I have to put myself out there. Well, how do you do that? Well, you got to get up on walls. And so initially, when I was first starting out, I had reached out to friends, connections that I did have, and I said, hey, if you have walls that you're open to me kind of creating a diverse portfolio of work where I'm doing work on walls, I would love to have the opportunity. And without hesitation, friends, messaged me and said, yeah, go for it. You can work at this business. You could do this wall over here. So somewhere like a private residence and somewhere just a public wall where I could do something that meant something to the community and so on. And so initially, yeah, pricing it, understanding, well, how do I price a mural? What it, what is everybody else doing? And then as you look around, you don't know what's fair and what's not, and you have to align that with what you think you're worth. And so in the beginning, there were a lot of sacrifices initially, because I was a new person to the game. So if I was charging somebody, it wasn't exactly the most expensive or the most standard rate. Even if I would be worth that much, I knew the opportunity to develop my portfolio and to be seen was more important. And so I took those risks initially, and it all paid off because let's face it, I mean, a mural is no different than a billboard off the side of the freeway. It's very visible, it's seen, and it's very apparent that it's handmade. So naturally, people want to inquire who did that, and so those were the obstacles in the beginning, but it really worked out. The important thing was just doing it. I think that was the
Yeah.
big one. Just go for it. Don't wait. There's tons of stuff you don't know. Don't wait.
Exactly. You learn along the way. And that's what's so fascinating talking with you, Sergio, because so many things are parallels to businesses and entrepreneurs. Because even that's the same way I started out, is you sometimes have to do service swaps or you do service for free to get a testimonial to start out. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of people are grinding like that to get their way up. And then we started with really, barely making any profit on packages until you start getting clients and then you raise the price. So it's a very
Mhm.
similar progression in building your business in a way and your art. So, what advice would you give to aspiring creative entrepreneurs who are afraid at stepping into the unknown and being their authentic selves?
Um, as far as well, you have to deal with yourself. The biggest obstacle is self, right? When you're getting out there and you're aspiring to do things, your biggest hurdle 9 times out of 10 is you. So, we had talked before, and I was thinking that, really think the big thing is addressing your fears. Like, what are those things that you're afraid of? Because if the entrepreneurship sort of lane hasn't begun or it hasn't started yet, let's be honest, something is telling you I can't, it's not possible, this is too risky, time, whatever issues you have in front of you. And so, again, one of those fears for me again was like the funding thing, right? Because it is expensive to do murals. And so uh I had to deal with that. And I would just tell them, deal with that first and realize there's a solution to all of those fears that you have, right? If you spend too much time being preoccupied about what's in the way or what's not possible, or where the problem is, and you're not spending enough time engaging that fear and figuring out how to get rid of it, with real solutions, with real ideas, you'll be stuck in it. So for me, I had to get over the fear of a lot of things. Am I good enough? Am I really going to be a good product? Can I have a career that's going to excel? Am I going to really be in demand? Uh, there's all those things. But the key was I had to get over the fear and I just had to act and things came. That's one thing that can't be denied. Like if you're making progress, if you're moving forward, if you're taking action, you do get results. I always compare it to a hike. You go up a hill, it's not going to be the most pleasant experience the whole way, but eventually you see the view, the vista, and then the hike is a pleasure. So and you just have to be real enough with yourself to realize that it's not always a treat. You talk about what a lot of people don't see is the grind, right? What a lot of people don't see is the roller coaster. Um, and there's this illusion that it's all sweet and good. Like we just came out of the box ready to go and ready to rock. And, few people have those exceptional stories that are so sweet, but really there's just a lot of private moments of struggle. So if, the other thing too is if you're assuming that success means not having that, you're completely wrong. That is your companion your whole life. There's going to be those moments. So that's definitely what I would say to an aspiring entrepreneur is like the unknown is a given and will always be present to some extent. You can refine your machine and you can know more and more and be more enlightened as you go along. But if you are truly an innovator and somebody who's breaking ground and going into the next arena and excelling, the unknown is your companion. It's like it's there. It's always there.
Yes, so true. You got to love the unknown and, in a way, your fears. I always say you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable all the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
one area I love that we were talking about is how you do art in your community.
Mhm.
So, how has community played a role on your journey as an entrepreneur? And what impact has your authenticity had on those communities that you've built through your art?
Yeah, community is huge. Um, And fine art is typically this department where people assume it's this lonely world where we're just in our studio and we're in our own minds and we're our own genius and nobody can tap into it except for us. And so when it comes to public art making and being a muralist, it's completely different. And one thing I learned early on when I was doing murals was that being tied to the community, engaging the community, canvassing the community, actually developing real relationships enriches the creativity that I step into when I'm making this public work. So, for example, when some of my earlier work was in East LA, in Boyle Heights, and in Boyle Heights, I I was born in Boyle Heights and I have family that goes back there 100 years, but I wasn't raised in those streets. And one thing that's unique about going from community to community, every single one is different. And Boyle Heights has a lot of rich history, diverse history. And more currently, you hear of things where they're battling against gentrification and issues like that. And so when I stepped into the community, immediately it was like, who are you? Why are you here? Who gave you this wall? Why did they pick you? Like, I almost needed to defend myself and vet for myself why I even had the right to paint in their own city. That's how the protective they were of their community. And immediately it became apparent that there's this responsibility as a public muralist, as an artist, that it's not about just showing up and saying, "Hi, I'm Sergio. Don't you like I'm Picasso, right? You you asked me to come here because you wanted my genius to be on these walls. So don't tell me what to do and just make sure to applause and pay me," right? That kind of mentality wasn't there. And so when being in Boyle Heights, it made me realize the people are going to be part of the process. And so for instance, I would actually sit down with people, talk with them, hear their stories. I would hear them talk about what matters in their community, what they actually want to see, what they don't want to see, uh, enlightening me. I had to be open to my own ignorance. And that was another beautiful phase of working with a community is if you decide to actually respect and acknowledge and see a community, you quickly realize how much you don't know. And it's so important not to navigate creatively in ignorance. So when they were talking to me, I kept finding myself being wrong about what I thought I knew. And the more people I talked to, the more balanced my perspective was before even beginning the design process. And when you finish a mural after going through all that, the community sees it. And what's great is person A down the street says, "That's my idea on the wall." And person B says, "He got that idea from my cousin." And then the person C says, "My sister actually helped a little bit on this mural. Uh, he let her paint and be part of it." And all of a sudden, there's this civic pride and involvement in the mural, and it's not just Picasso showing up and saying I'm a genius. It's this collaborative effort where all of a sudden you have all these people that deserve just as much to have their signature on that wall. And it's awesome because the impact it has is you have almost like representatives and ambassadors of your work that are out there speaking on your behalf because you made them part of the process. And so community's been absolutely huge, even to the point where communities where things are typically vandalized or graffiti gets on it, the city protects it and they make sure nobody touches it. And if there's anybody associated with graffiti, they've already been talked to. It's amazing. And people even ask, like, "I'm surprised your stuff hasn't been tagged yet," because everything gets tagged around here, and it's not. And because of that, it's also led to the news being involved and interviewing me, and from there, corporations want to be a part of that too because they realize this is a process where community matters, and it's been powerful because of that. Being able to be humble, being able to accept your ignorance, and also being above the ego to where you let others be part of your creative process.
Yeah, I love that. I remember when you first told me that, that was so fascinating to me and how you were able to think about including the community art, having them participating in it, and then they feel like they're a part of it. It's so ingenious because it's similar to what entrepreneurs do. Like we're trying to create communities online and interacting with them, asking them what they think before creating a product, getting market research. So, yeah, I love that. It's very cool. Do you have a project that you'd say was your favorite that you ever worked on?
Oh man, there's I've done over 100 murals, and there's so many unique things that have come from each experience. I think there was one in particular that I did in Lincoln Heights, and it was sponsored by the Department of Cultural Affairs, and they specifically tasked me with the prompt was this: we need a mural that celebrates um, local landmarks, civic rights or civil rights, people, and it had to include people from Lincoln Heights. So local landmarks, civil rights, athletes from the community, uh, that even if were in the Olympics or professional athletes, we want that involved. And then what was the last one? Um, Gosh, what was it? Oh, like native plants and things like that from the community. So I had to like mesh together all these things: civil rights leaders, athletes, local landmarks, and the local native plant life and things like that. So right off the bat, it was a challenge. But what was great is I ended up finding out how many amazing people Lincoln Heights actually has, and it led to me actually again, which is usually my process, talking to these people, and I was able to talk with Paula Cristostomo, who was one of the high school students that led the walkouts in 1968, which kind of fought against inequality in education. And I got to talk with Vivian Acosta, who was the co-author of Title IX, who really changed the game for women's rights in college sports and making sure that there's actual like fair equity and giving out scholarships and things like that. And Kenny Washington, who was the first African American player signed to the NFL. So I got to meet with his family and talk to his daughter. And it was just an amazing experience because I found myself learning so much. And again, I think the greatest gift out of that experience was um, expanding my knowledge, like on a region in LA that I didn't know much about. And here I had this like deep understanding of how rich the city was, especially in terms of like, it wasn't just a good athlete. It was an athlete who paved the way for other African Americans. It wasn't just, somebody who was involved in legal issues, but actually opening doors for generations to come. Like, it was just an exciting project to do. And I could tell stories about a lot of murals, but you asked about one in particular, and that one was a beautiful one because not only that, it was in a public park, and if you scan the land to the left, you see downtown LA, and you can kind of view Chinatown into the Broadway into LA. So there's this sort of story, even contextually, visually, going on with the mural. So I just loved all of it. Yeah, all of it was really exciting.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. If you guys follow him on Instagram, you can see a lot of his artwork and it's incredible. And so, how do you deal with external competition in the creative field? And do you use social media and online platforms to authentically connect with your audience and grow your brand and stand out from the competition?
Yeah. Um, as far as competition goes, I think this can go across any department, really. You have to be distinct. You have to have something that sets you apart. And I think for me, it's hard to say like people are competition, but if I'm going to be realistic, they are, right? Because we're all doing the same things and bids are going out there and you want it, right? You want those opportunities. Um, but I'm always, if anything, I'm positively happy for my competition, but I know that in being consumed in my own world, my whole thing is standing apart. That's number one. Number two is actually being a legitimate professional. providing your customer an amazing experience where you're responsive, you care about meeting their needs as much as possible. I think that's something I really care about is I'm not going to be a pain or a fuss because you don't like something I did initially. If you want to redesign things, if you want to edit, if you want to start over entirely, in my heart and in my mind, I might go, oh my gosh, do you know I just put in 68 hours into this design, but we want to go back to ground zero? I might be thinking that, but all I need to assert in front of them is my enthusiasm to move forward. Let's go. You don't like it, scrap it. We need to make sure that you're happy, right? Because if everybody's winning, that's the sweetest negotiation, right? So that's really important to me. That because at the end of the day, all my work really has come from word of mouth. People saying, you need to go to him. He was great. He was fast. He was on top of it. We even had to change some things, and we were just really pleased with the results of it all. So, like, your reputation does matter. So, besides having a distinct style artistically, um, it's important that professionally, the word gets around that you're going to be on time, you're going to deliver, and it's a positive experience. That's huge. I mean, just leaning on being good isn't enough because if the experience isn't great, they will forget about you and they won't mention you. You know,
Yeah.
you were a bad experience, so um and even competitively when it comes to style, one thing that I like to do is I like to be flexible to where I'm not a one-trick pony. There's pros and cons to that, but it's ended up creating more opportunities for me. They can see that I'm flexible. They can see that if they have a vision, I can match it instead of them just wanting something that's a brand. And what else? As far as connecting with my audience, that comes through the community, actually interviewing people, actually caring what they think. Um, and as far as standing out from your competition, if I'm going to be honest, that's something that in my personal world, I want to continue to develop and I want to continue to work on. The branding of myself. I think it's really important to be on top of all of your social media. It is so underestimated how valuable of an asset that is, social media. You you can keep people entertained through your social media platforms. You show them they get a piece of your mind, they get a piece of your experience, they get a piece of what makes you special, and you got to keep feeding it because if you don't, well, they just keep swiping and somebody else will fill in that void. So it- they are amazing tools that we have, whether it's like posting videos on YouTube or if it's using social media. Um, you do have to respect them as an entrepreneur. They matter. They shape the how people perceive you. They shape what people expect of you, and they also shape people's confidence and enthusiasm for you. I mean, because otherwise, how else are they going to know? How else are they going to be able to refer you or even reach out to you? Being accessible, but also keeping the public informed regularly in a fresh way is exciting for people. They want something to come back to. And so I think as far as audience and growing brand, you do have to take those departments seriously and you have to refresh them. You look at any of the biggest people, like I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with the fashion brand Amiri, and sometimes when I'm there on location with them, I'm seeing a department that's already a year ahead, 2 years ahead, and they don't plan on looking the same next time you see them, and they're already on that. There's all this projection. I'm sure you've seen it with brands that you've worked with. So I think seeing and planning ahead is also important. It's no different than an author writing his book and writing out the chapters. Like you can craft your story, right? And it's okay to be ahead. It's good to be present, but it's also great to see ahead. Why not imagine like this beautiful story before it even pans out? Um,
Yes.
I don't know. Those are
I
some
love
things that
that.
I think of. Yeah.
Yeah, so valuable. And again, I just love just seeing so many parallels to business in anything. So even you're saying you have to, be on time, do your work, have a good attitude. It's interesting how simple things like that create success no matter what field you're in. And that was the same actually for me with modeling. So it was, I thought, gosh, everyone looks the same as me. You're not actually that unique once you get into that industry. And I actually thought of quitting, but then it was one of my mentors. He's like, "No, you're gonna do well," because he's like, "You're respectful, you show up on time, like you're polite and you're smart." And I was thinking, like, is that really gonna get me that far? But it did, and it actually
Yeah.
helped me to stand out from the crowd. And what's interesting is I feel like it's portrayed in movies a lot or shows that the creative side, like everyone's just kind of a genius and can get
Yes.
away with anything they want, right? And maybe like flip out at an art project and like, but they're still going to get hired. But
Yeah.
in reality, that's really not the case because kind of like you're saying, like you're working with actual brands and with like you're saying, like the county or right, like serious things. And so
Mhm.
you have to show up professionally. And yes, think of yourself as a brand and your reputation. So yeah, I think that's so fascinating because you're so intelligent and you picked that up and was able to make your art into this incredible career by utilizing so many of these strategies and being intelligent about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so what I want to ask is, how did you find your unique art way? Like, did that just come out from like you just started art and your style just came through, or was that something you had to find?
Well, with me, it's a little bit complicated because stylistically, aesthetically speaking, I constantly evade myself, if you will. It's not evade myself. I consider myself a situationist. So stylistically, what happens is that even talking to you and having this moment with you, if I was asked to do art, it would it would beckon certain materials, certain processes that I would create. So the 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 pro and con with me, the con being this, most of the time when people think of art, they need to see something and be like, that's Sergio, right? Or that's, or that's Chanel, or that's whatever. Like they could see it in the work, and there's a certain look about it that makes it very distinct. And so a lot of times in art, because it's a commercial world, galleries and things like that, they need that. The collector needs that, the gallery needs that, so they can always be like, there it is, that's so and so on. So in my fine art career, I had a hard time. I would have solo shows and they would do great, and they say, great, keep doing it. And then I'd say, no, because now I'm here. And so it sort of defeated me as far as like having an identity and a brand. But what's nice about doing work for these companies with murals and things like that is that I'm allowed to be more of a chameleon, and I think people like me for that. And they come, and so I've worked with, say, like with film directors, they'll come back to me because they knew I did three different things and three different styles for one movie, and then they bring me back for another one, and they know that they can just spit whatever they have on their mind, and I'll make it work. So my brand has been in my flexibility as opposed to like having a distinct style. But as I've done so many murals through the years, some styles have repeated because it's like, I think this will work for this. And, I think this will work for that, because you start to develop this arsenal. But I typically see myself as having like a spread of different aesthetics and different looks that work for various projects. But still, there's more looks being added to that repertoire of like things as I'm going along. So
Very cool. So your
yeah,
style's kind of evolving as you go. Yeah, it's
yeah,
very similar to business. Same thing. Like you're always evolving
yeah,
your packages and your offerings and your style. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Well, another thing I want to ask you, because I feel like you mentioned, was it that you worked with a basketball team or to do their jerseys? So I'm just curious, like what that, type of work is as an artist, because maybe that's the next level you have to go to kind of maybe commercialize it or get, those kinds of offers.
Well, as an artist, you have the right to choose your battles. You can say no to projects that don't align with you. And as far as, well, the basketball one in particular, that was I was asked last minute, maybe two weeks before the NBA finals, to create all the art for the NBA finals, like for depicting the players and things like that. And I ended up not taking it because I think they were putting their feelers out. They had somebody on board, and they were putting their feelers out for other budgets to see if they could, find something sweeter. So I think I might have been used as a pawn in the whole negotiating process with an initial artist that they wanted. And they were transparent with me about that. But but your question in particular was to be open to changing depending on like the project.
I guess kind of like, I think artists they have sometimes go into that commercial space where they start licensing their art out and you can print it on things or
Mhm.
but then some artists feel like that's selling out. But do you feel like
Oh, okay.
that's part of the next of the evolution for you too, is like
What I would
commercializing?
the advice I would give is that when it comes to being a creative and an artist, again, you have the freedom to choose what you want to do with your art. And I don't think it's selling out if you want to license your work. I've done that. I've licensed out imagery and like original art to be a part of a commercial or to be a part of this. And so you can choose your battles, right? You could say, no, I don't want to do it. But I don't think it's selling out if you did it, because if in your heart and in your mind, you see what it is, it's a commercial work intended for commercial purposes, and I'm okay with it being here, then it's all right. But if you know you're all in your head and frustrated and angry, but you're compromising for the sake of money, well, you screwed up because you need to go with you first. You need to be happy, right? So, um, that's what I would say. It's just you need to know what you're at peace with. And there's no point in labeling somebody a sellout. It's their life. Let them do what they want to do, right? Like if that's their happiness and that's their business model, cool. Like more power to them. Don't waste your time trying to act like you're the authority on art and what makes it pure and what doesn't make it pure. Define it for yourself. I mean, everybody knows there's no definition for art in the first place. So like creatively speaking, do what works for you. And all I would say is, I think one of the big struggles in creatively as an artist is you get thrown so many scenarios. You get a say a commercial that says, "Well, we want to use your work, but we don't know exactly how we're going to use it, but we only have this in our budget, and we're only going to pay you this much." And next thing you know, it's in a Super Bowl commercial, and you're like, you said it was B-roll. You know what I mean? So I think it's important when you're dealing with different clients to ask all your questions and be very clear and don't be afraid to set boundaries on how your art should be used too, because some of those contracts are just like, it's ours. Once you sign this, we can do whatever we want in perpetuity. I can throw it on t-shirts and CDs and whatever. And I've heard horror stories of like guys who only got paid $300 and it was like the whole tour campaign, their art everywhere. And so um, that's a situation not where you're selling out, but where you're selling yourself short. So as sometimes opportunities come up, like say the NBA one for me, and you feel like I gotta get this, but they understand if you're a professional, you need time to think, you need time to circle back, and you need to get your counsel where you need to get your counsel to make sure like you're being treated fairly. Um, so yeah, sometimes that could be a challenge.
Yeah, that's so important to bring up because that's important in any scenario that you learn. You kind of go through the fire with contracts and clients, but then, yeah, you realize over time, you're like, okay, I should have put more in the contract or in modeling too, very common, where suddenly your image is getting used everywhere. So you have to
Mhm.
be, yeah, really careful with your terms. And even for me and my social media agency, starting to work with say like difficult clients that overstep boundaries, so you didn't really have to put all these specific details in the contract, but now that you've experienced that client, you're like, okay, now let's add these details. So it's
Mhm.
a learning process as you
Oh yeah.
navigate the waters of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the arts in particular, artists, there's this it's almost like people out in the professional world feel like they can lean into you more and like pressure you and kind of coerce you into things you shouldn't be doing a lot because most of us are like nice people. We're not we're not aggressive types trying to like you know be rough around the edges like that. Um, yeah, you got to look
Yeah.
out for yourself. So it's
Yeah.
more about don't sell yourself short more than it is about selling out. Selling out is just a term people throw out there just to, I don't know, create contention, but it's I don't think it's really an important topic. I think
Mm.
more so just are you selling yourself short? You
Yes.
know, make sure you're not.
Yeah, for sure. One part I'd love for you to share, I feel like you mentioned that you had this kind of internal transition when you mentioned it earlier, this struggle with, clients coming back, like you've done something for 68 hours and then they're like, let's start over, or it's completely not your vision that you feel drawn towards.
Right.
Um, and I remember you were saying there was like an internal shift you had to make, kind of, because at first you were hating it, but then how
Yeah.
did you shift to enjoying it? Yeah.
Yes. So I had to I had to create departments. I had to say, here's my fine art. No one can ever tell me what to do. No one can ever tell me to change anything, and nobody can ever tell me I'm wrong. But that's my baby. You can't touch it. But if I'm doing client work, I had to say this is just customer service. At the end of the day, they're hiring you. You're getting paid for a service. So yeah, I had to put it upon myself like this is part of the game. And from that point, it became a pleasure. Whereas before, if anybody told me to fix anything, I was upset, frustrated. They don't have any vision. Whatever goes through your head as an artist, like, oh, they have like the worst taste ever, but they're just people with money and they don't even know. But then all of a sudden they have an opinion now. Like all those things come up. And but if you set it in your mind that that's your job, then it's not a big deal. And the other thing that gives you peace of mind is also being clear with your clients beforehand that there are charges for modifications, that there are charges for changing things. And then, secondly, if you're in a creative role with a client, if there are decision makers involved in this project, I always say I need to talk to all of them first. If there's going to be a briefing on what is desired for this project, everybody that's making a choice needs to be in the room because otherwise you end up with surprises. You create this design that satisfied person 1 through 3, and then they tell you, oh, there's person 5 through 8. We're going to let them see. And then there's all these conflicts and disagreements going on. And so I always say, like, everybody needs to be at the table before we begin. And secondly, if we're going to make changes, here's the list of charges you will have depending on what type of changes we're going to make. And it also makes people wake up like, oh, okay, we need to narrow it down first because I'm not going to pay an extra so and so for a mistake. So let's be clear with them. So they kind of prioritize their communication. There's nobody hidden behind the scenes, and that also helps too. Um,
Yeah, love that. I love that you found a way to segment it for yourself. And yeah, very true. Same within business. You have to kind of figure that out as you go. And
Mhm.
even the decision makers, like you said, I've learned that too, that sometimes you'll get, a big company, so you're dealing with the assistant or someone on their
Yeah.
team. And then they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, this is what that person wants. And then you do all this work, you come back, and then actually the client or the decision maker has all these other ideas of what they actually wanted, and you have to start over. So definitely have learned that as well. You want to
Mhm.
get the person who you're servicing, like that final decision maker, like you have to get them on the call or you're going to waste resources and time.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Resources and time for sure.
Yeah, lots of ways there.
Your sanity. Yeah.
Yes, and your sanity. Always. Oh my God. Well, this was so interesting. I do want to open up the floor in case anyone has any questions for Sergio, whether it's about his art or relating it to business. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat, or we can also unmute you. We'll just wait a little bit. Sometimes the questions pop up. But what are you working on next, Sergio? What's like
Uh,
your
the next
exciting art project?
the closest one right now is I'm doing a couple long hallway sections for Kaiser for their hospital in Downey. So we're working on designing those right now. And then another outdoor area where they want something done. And outside of that, couple just community projects. One in Boyle Heights where This is just donated, but it's going to be a wall kind of celebrating the community, the history of the community on a specific block where we had it goes back about 50 years. At least historically, the mural will go back about 50 years, but that's an exciting one on Cesar Chavez Boulevard. Um, what else? Arts District. This it's just a quick one with some buddies, like some friends that wanted to do a tribute to Fernando Valenzuela, the Dodger who passed away recently. So that's another one. Um, and yeah, those are the closest ones right now that are
Wow,
going
it's
on.
like that's a lot of projects. That's
Yeah.
exciting. Because I guess they must take a long time, so you have to go over time to create it.
Yeah, honestly, I sometimes I spend more time planning and sketching than I do actually painting it because a lot of the work that I do is with spray paint and it's fast. So like I'm able to execute things quickly. I love working with the material, but yeah, it just depends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also interesting. Similar to business, you want to plan before you kind
Hmm.
of start to execute, or it can be messy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a question. Hey,
Yeah.
Sergio, how do you handle rejection once you put your all your creativity into a project and it gets rejected? What's your strategy?
Uh, the strategy is an honest reflection on where you might have like didn't connect with the client. Like, why wasn't I the one? Obviously that's where you go. You're bummed, you're hurt, but really how I handle it is like, let's be real. Something was amiss. You missed something. What was it? And sometimes I might reach out directly and be like, hey, can I just have a moment to know your personal thoughts on why you think it didn't connect? What was more attractive about another potential client? If they take the time, cool. Because I'm only going to be more informed and better equipped. Um, yeah, so I think just being realistic about being honest with yourself. Like in the same way that I go to a client and if they want something fixed, I'm going to be adamant about problem solving. When you lose, you also have to be adamant about problem solving. And it's an education, it's an opportunity to be educated, right? It's an opportunity to learn. This is very cliche stuff, but like it's true, right? It is cliche because it is in fact true. Um, and sometimes in life, rejection there might be factors that were out of your control before it even began. Sometimes you have things where they put an open bid out there, and behind the scenes, it's already been figured out, but they have to go through their process, and you got lured into something that wasted your time. So that can happen too, and that can be really disappointing. Um, but you just have to be more determined to find the next thing, and then honestly, on like a grander scale of thinking, is that idea of like it wasn't meant for you. Like the universe did you a favor. You might be losing your mind over not having a specific project, but maybe like life is directing you exactly where you need to go. And so just assert your positive energy in that direction because otherwise you can really beat yourself up and be grouchy about it. There's nothing wrong with being disappointed. And there's nothing wrong with being mad for a little window of a time because you know your worth. But I feel like a lot of the energy needs to be on problem solving, figuring out what you could do better, an honest self analysis of what you did, and then just move on. Move on, you know?
Yeah, that's great advice. I agree. You still need to let yourself feel the emotions for sure, and then you
Yeah,
move on. Yeah, you're like,
yeah.
get it out somehow. He said, great response. It's an opportunity to be educated, to find out what you missed and fixed it. Thanks. Hey,
Yeah.
Sophia, this is Mark Allen Clark too. Hi, Mark Allen. Thanks so much for joining everyone on here. And we're at time, but thank you so much, Sergio. That was such a fascinating conversation as always. I love hearing about your art and the way you think about it. It's just you're so intelligent and creative. And thanks for being here. And I think
Thank you so
everyone,
much for having me.
yay,
Yeah.
thank you.